Great. Thank you all so much for coming. Welcome to our final Thrive webinar of the semester. We have a panel of AIAS 2020 graduates. Where are they now? That's what they're here to tell you all about their experiences graduating and jumping into the profession during the pandemic. We're really excited for them to share their stories and for you to ask your questions if you have them. This is your chance to hear from those who've been through it all in the past year. We're very excited to have Black Spectacles sponsoring this webinar, and we have Mark Tier here to moderate this panel for us today. So very excited to introduce to you all Mark Tier. He is the founder and CEO of Black Spectacles, a member of the AIA College of Fellows, a former award-winning architect at Gensler, an assistant adjunct professor at the Illinois Institute of Technology, and the chair of AIA Chicago's Young Architects Forum. He founded Black Spectacles in 2010 to advance the creative potential of architecture and design through online learning. Take it away, Mark. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks for having me. It's exciting to be with all of you and to moderate this discussion. I know that there's a lot of really good stories that you guys are going to hear about navigating this transition in your careers. What's so cool, I think, about being able to do this with you guys is Black Spectacles has partnered with the AIAS since literally like the first days of this business that I started. I went off on my own and started my own business after practicing architecture for 15 years. And it's been awesome to be partner with the AIAS all this time. Our goal at Black Spectacles is to help all of you architects thrive in your careers. I swear I did not write that to match the title of this webinar series. Yeah, it's again, I think that says a lot about why it's so well aligned. If you don't know what Black Spectacles is or what we do, I guess the way to say it is we sort of help architects with your careers in two key ways. So first, we're the #1 test prep provider for the ARE. So when you guys are ready to start studying for the exams to get your license, Black Spectacles is the place to come. We're the first NCARB approved test prep provider, and it's kind of crazy. The last time NCARB published figures on the ARE, we learned that nearly 60% of the people who took the ARE to get their license use Black Spectacles, which totally blew me away when I figured that out. When we've looked at pass rates and so forth, it's exciting to us because our pass rates are like 20% higher than the national average. So when you're ready to take your exams, blackspectacles.com is the place to come. We have a lot of free resources to get you started. It's funny, earlier today, we did one of our ARE live webinars, which we record and turn them into podcasts. That's a great free resource you guys can go and check out, again, on blackspectacles.com. The second thing we do to help architects is totally new and is just about to launch, and it's called Spectacular. We were inspired kind of by two things. First, this focus on helping architects thrive in their careers, but also, as we all know, the impact that the pandemic has had on so many architects, and it being a difficult time to find jobs and network and so forth. And so we've built a brand new community called Spectacular. Spectacular is going to be the place where you can come to present your professional profile and portfolio. It'll be a place where you can find jobs all over the world, and a place where you can find architects and firms to find inspiration for your work. As you guys know, aside from it being a hard time to find work in architecture, especially as a student or an up-and-coming architect, it's also hard to get your work featured and published as an up-and-coming architect. And so what I'm super excited about is that for architects like you who share your portfolio of projects on Spectacular, we're going to pour over all the new projects added to Spectacular and feature the best ones on our homepage every single day. So it's a really exciting endeavor that I've been dreaming about for like 10 years. It's finally coming to be. So if you go to spectacular.design, you can go there and sign up to get an early invite to join. Again, it's free, and you'll get exclusive early access. Again, it has not officially launched yet. It may not launch for a couple of weeks or months, but we are starting to send out early invites. So those are the two things we do at Black Spectacles. And with that, let's transition to the real meat of this conversation, which are these beautiful people in front of you. So why don't we do this? Why don't I have each of you introduce yourself? Maybe you can share of course, your name, your school that you attended, maybe what degree you earned, the organizations you're involved in, and what you're doing now. And I suppose why don't we can start with Wesley, and then we can go to Michael, and then Allison. So Wesley, name, school, degree, groups. What are you doing now?
My name is Wesley McGlory. I graduated from Texas Tech in August of 2020 with a Master of Architecture and a certificate in Urban and Community Design. And while I was in school, I was involved with both AIAS and Nomas as our chapter vice president. And right now I'm working full-time at PDMS Design Group in Arlington, Texas, which focuses on a lot of retail projects.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you, Wesley, and welcome. Michael.
Hey, I'm Michael Baer. I graduated from Wentworth Institute of Technology in Boston, obviously in 2020. I graduated with a Bachelor's of Science in Architecture and a minor in Project Management. I was involved heavily with founding our Freedom by Design chapter, and then going on to serve in the Freedom by Design Advisory Committee, and then co-chairing it with Allison Katz as well. And now I'm actually in between jobs. I just left my last job as a carpenter at a construction company, and I'm looking right now to move into service in the Peace Corps.
Oh, wow. Wonderful. Thank you, Michael, and welcome. We'll do Allison, and then Kina, and then we'll finish with Genevieve.
Hi, I'm Allie. I graduated from Carnegie Mellon with a Bachelor of Architecture. I was involved with the AIAS. I too founded our Freedom by Design chapter and then co-chaired the Freedom by Design Advisory Committee with Michael last year. And I'm currently in Houston, Texas, working as a design associate for BC Workshop, which is a nonprofit architecture firm / CDC. For Texas, we work all over from Dallas to Brownsville.
Beautiful. Thank you, Allison, and welcome. Kina.
My name is Kina Miles. I graduated from Auburn University with an undergraduate in architecture and a graduate degree in landscape architecture. I was part of the AIAS and really worked with the fundraising efforts, mostly a thing that we did called Dog Days, Nomas, and then ASLA. Currently, I work at Studio Brian Haynes in Philadelphia. And yeah, we do a lot of work, green roofs, urban design, large landscapes and whatnot, and also some work in Arkansas. So that's me now.
Thank you, Kina, and welcome. And Genevieve.
Hi, everyone. My name is Genevieve Enriquez. I graduated from Woodbury University in California last year, May of 2020. And I graduated with a master's degree in architecture. I do have a bachelor's degree in business. And I was the chapter president last year for Woodbury University for AIAS. And I was actually one of the recipients of the Chapter Leader Honors Award last year for 2020. And right now I'm actually currently an emerging profession. I hold a position for our local chapter for AIA Pasadena Foothill. So I'm new to it, so I am an emerging profession. And then so right now I'm trying to work locally with universities right now, and I'm going out to reach out to directors and all the students and also the faculty. So I will have a meeting with them next week, so I need to set that up. And right now I'm actually in my office in downtown LA. So I'm taking a break and working right now and then meeting you guys. So
Awesome. So you're chomping at the bit over there.
Yes.
Proper architect. Well done. Thank you. And welcome, Genevieve. All right. Well, we can move on to the exciting part of this conversation, which is to hear your stories. So I'm going to start with you, Wesley. We had this pandemic that's still going on. And it happened, of course, in the second semester, the last semester of the school year last year. So Wesley, how did the pandemic impact your final semester of school or your postgraduate plans?
For the first half, like towards the end of our first half of the semester in late February, we just had a career fair, so I was already lined up with numerous firms for second round interviews. And then we had a pandemic hit. We were supposed to be going to Mexico City for our site visit. And that was the first blow. And then once we found out that Texas Tech was going online for the rest of the semester, we just had to switch to online classes. And I was still trying to figure out what to do since I was still in consideration with a number of firms. And then a few of them wanted to keep in touch, and then one kept in touch with me and had a second round phone interview instead of an in-person interview. It wasn't until after Memorial Day last year when they made me an offer, and I'm still working there now.
Oh, wow. Okay, that's great. Thank you, Wesley. Are there anybody else on this panel? Did you have kind of a interesting sort of story of, how that pandemic sort of maybe threw you a curveball at the end there, Allie?
Yeah, so I think we all kind of had an idea of what we wanted, like the end of our school year to look like, and working from home was on my thesis was not a part of that.
Yeah.
But beyond like graduation, any plans I had for like potentially working full time kind of fell through. But what working remotely did allow for was being able to do freelance work. So I actually started doing some research for professors. And then also I ended up illustrating a book with a former colleague of mine that I had connected with through the thesis that I had just worked on. And so those types of projects aren't things I would have necessarily considered had I had like full-time employment figured out. So like I was lucky enough to be able to take on those opportunities and be in a position where I could accept part-time work. But that was a cool opportunity for me to kind of go outside of what like people generally think is architecture and explore other fields temporarily.
Yeah, how did you make those things happen? If I'm listening to this, if I'm coming out of school, I'm like, that sounds great. How the heck do you make that stuff happen?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm really lucky and I had a lot of support from faculty and I had made a lot of close connections, and one of them had me and my thesis partner in mind for a research project that she was working on. And so she brought us into that. That was something that she had secured funding for. And a lot of the work they were doing was already kind of remote. It was partially like community engagement. We were doing research on outdoor common spaces of co-housing, like eco-housing project. And then the illustration project kind of happened randomly because this person had looked at my website and saw that I had a past of doing art, which was literally from high school. And it was kind of a great combination of the previous work I had done in high school and then also adding on to architectural skills because she was formerly a zoning employee. So her book was all about like zoning. So the combination of like illustration, like more classic illustration and like architectural drawings was kind of what she needed.
Got it. Yeah, that's great. Allie, Michael, you raised your hand. Seemed like you might've had one.
Yeah, I wanted to echo what Allie said, which is like plans just last semester or the last semester was like just all fell apart. Like for me, Wentworth has a 4-year bachelor's of science and architecture, but they encourage you to take a 1-year master after that. And due to the pandemic, I actually forewent taking my master's. And I think part of the reason for that was the pandemic allowed me, for example, to see that the role of the architect is different. And like, what am I going to do with my degree as a different question that I hadn't really considered. I think I got tunnel vision in a school where I saw the end goal of like, okay, master's right after bachelor's. But I think the extended gap between those two has really made me reconsider what to do with what I want to do with my degree. And that's one of the reasons I went into more humanitarian with the AmeriCorps and then eventually the Peace Corps.
Awesome. Thank you, Michael. Kina, did you have something?
Yeah, I wanted to add to what Allison was saying as well, that not even deep into the pandemic, once we were online, I didn't stay in my apartment. I moved home, which was very unfortunate during my final semester. You got your parents on you and stressing you out on top of everything else that they don't understand what's going on. But anyways, but early on, I was concerned about getting a job. So I talked to my professors about working with them on research more, because I knew that was something that I was still, because of how much studio work we had, it was still hard for me to balance working for them during school. So having that opportunity during the summer to kind of concentrate and really learn the things that I guess working for your professors or working with your professors really trying to teach you. That was my goal. It just happened that I got a job pretty quickly, but yeah, I mean, your professors are your resource, so you gotta look.
That's awesome.
Put the money in, you might as well use them.
I'm hearing all of you sound like you were somewhat entrepreneurial and that you went hunting for, what's that next thing that I can do to sort of move forward, which is awesome to hear. So let's see here. And by the way, for everyone who's listening, feel free to, we have the little chat box open on the side here. So if you have any questions, they'll come to me and I can sort of try to share them with the group. So don't hesitate, everyone who's listening, to throw in a question, send it to me or send it to everyone, and I'll try to tee it up. I'm going to move on to the next question here with the move. And I guess, let's see, Genevieve, we'll start with you on this one. With the move to remote work happening as you're entering the profession, which is sort of a crazy thought, that the whole work environment was shifting in real time as you guys were entering the profession. How did that change the process of looking for and applying and securing a job?
So luckily, same thing, I guess, with Wesley, what he was going through with his school is that they had a career fair. So we went through the process as well too. So I did apply to some firms who I was interested working with the following by the end of postgraduate. But then luckily I was able to apply to another firm that was not part of our career fair. And then so they were so quick to, I guess in a way we kind of negotiated saying that, well, I'm still in school, I like what you guys do. And then we negotiate where I was working with them part-time. And then by the time I graduate, we were going to negotiate if I was going to go full-time or whatnot. So obviously during the whole pandemic and that whole thing that's happening, I probably came into the office probably 4 times in here, and then everything else went remote. So luckily they decided to continue to have me in the office. And then I guess when graduated happened, then I just became just a part-time still. I think midsummer, then that's when they decided to transfer me to a project that's actually full-time, but I wasn't a full-time employee. So long story short, I was a part-time until this year actually. So they actually put me on board as a full-time salary base and all that stuff. So I hung on to it. So there were a couple of days I was just worried, like, okay, am I, are they going to give me more hours to work and stuff like that? So I was kind of hanging on and stuff like that. So
yeah. I see. So my takeaways as I'm thinking about this, our career fair was a big deal because
it was.
You participated in that, you connected with firms, and you probably interviewed and eventually secured, let's say, an agreement for a job that turned out to be part-time, and you sort of hung in there and sort of made it through. Okay. Allie, I think, did you have a story about this, about how, entering the profession during this time, how you navigated that?
Yeah, so I applied to like over 130 jobs.
Wow.
And I didn't start working full time until February. And at that point I was working remote for BC and then moved here in March. So this role for me is pretty new. I had worked for BC before as an intern in 2018 and came back, which is one of the reasons why I was able to kind of, rejoin them so seamlessly working remotely. And I think when I was looking at positions, the fact that a lot of companies were going remote meant that I was kind of thinking about what positions I would be willing to move for versus what ones I would be willing to work remotely for, and then potentially find something I was more interested in, because I'm very my interests in architecture are very specific. So I didn't go to the job fair because there quite honestly weren't really any firms I was interested in talking to then. That was February. And then my friends who had secured jobs through there, a lot of them ended up just losing them anyway. So I was kind of just flung off a waterfall, which was partially my fault. But then also just the pandemic kind of rocked everyone's boat, obviously. So that just kind of made me rethink exactly how I'd wanted to work for who. And it also worked out because then I was able to take time working remotely for BC, save up some money and then move, which was super helpful because not working full time for 9 months was not in my schedule. So that was not fun.
Not in the plans. 130 jobs. Holy smokes. Everybody else, same thing. 130 jobs, 150. Like, how many jobs are you guys applying for? I'd love to hear.
Say that's impressive dedication. I didn't touch 30, so.
Super specific spreadsheet. It's probably going to be painful for me to look at in the future.
It'll probably be really valuable. Michael, did you have something there?
No, that's just the most Allison Katz thing I've ever heard. But I applied to a bunch of different jobs. I think someone mentioned moving back home. I also moved back home, and I moved from a city, Boston, to a much smaller city, Hagerstown in Maryland. And the jobs actually shift from all online, is typically in the city, to more essential / working class. And a lot of the jobs I was applying to was no longer working in an office. It was always on the field, on site, or something like that. So there was a definite transition from being in college where you're doing all your work on a computer and submitting to now in the pandemic, in the midst of it, especially back last year, working on the front lines. And in one case, I was a grocery store clerk and then switched over to carpentry. And in both cases, you face, we went through a bunch of waves of things throughout the last year being on the front lines. Did not apply to 130, I'll say that.
One of the things that's going through my mind right now, and I'd love to hear everyone's opinion on this. You guys all know that for a million years, architecture is an in-person only type of job, right? It's only possible to practice architecture if you're in person. That's the thinking, or has been the thinking. Of course, the pandemic upended that and forced many firms to rethink that. I would love to know, and we can go around maybe, I don't know, Genevieve and Kina, and then Allison, Wesley, and Michael, sort of in that order. I'd love to know what you guys think about practicing architecture in a remote setting, working from home 100%. What's your Genevieve, what's your feelings about that?
I mean, so we all experienced it last year on our last semester of our academia career. So we've moved from, PowerPoint presentations, InDesign presentations, and also concept boards, whiteboards, and then screen sharing, Zooms, and communications like that. And then working in the office, we're doing the same thing too. So when we do red lighting, we use Bluebeam, paint even, just to even show marks and stuff like that. Honestly, I like it just because, everyone's on the same screen, everyone's looking at the same page and all that stuff. And, you're able to, there is a flexibility of working hours too. That's the plus too. Less commute as well. No parking in downtown. You know, so there's a lot of ups and downs. And of course, the downside is that since I just started, I barely know all of my coworkers. I do miss, you know, the hangouts and stuff. Some of our happy hours in the beginning were somewhat awkward just because it's a little different when you're drinking in front of the computer, in front of everyone and stuff like that, and then getting to know each other. So it's a roller coaster. And now that everything is opening up, people are coming back to the office very slowly. I think, you know, I think the work culture is starting to change too. So people are able to have more flexible coming in and stuff like that. Because I noticed, like, I'm able to finish a lot of my work at home for some reason, just because I guess, you know, cutting out the traffic and all that stuff, conditions. So yeah.
Super interesting. Thank you, Genevieve. Kina, I'd love to know what you think.
I think it's kind of like two parts to it. There's the actual you doing your job versus how you feel about the actual job. So in terms of doing the job, I do enjoy working from home better. On top of the fact that my firm is more, each person has their own project. So you have more of a, it's collaboration when you want it rather than having to collaborate. So I think that makes it easier to do the work. The issue comes in the just working for an entity that you don't know that well. So at times you just question what you're even working for. You've met these people maybe once or twice in real life, and sometimes you just forget that they're real people. Me personally, we have Monday morning not Monday morning, every morning check-ins. And for a minute, it got weird to me that it was like, I talk to these people every day and I don't know them like that. They're the first people I wake up to. And but it's gotten better since things have opened up and I've met them. But yeah, I think it's a two-part thing of how you work yourself versus how you work for and with the entity that you work for.
That makes a ton of sense, Kina. Thank you. I appreciate that a lot. Allison, or Ali, sorry, I keep reading your name.
Either is fine. So BC Workshop is a bit different in the way they work, just because currently we have 3 offices, one in Dallas, one in Houston, and one in Brownsville. And I only have one coworker here in Houston. So we work in person generally together. It's really nice to share a space with another person. We've been wearing masks and we're both fully vaccinated. So that's been really great. But we kind of already have a hybrid working model because we work with the other offices often on projects. We're working on a project down in Brownsville, and one of my coworkers down there is in this as a participant here. So hi, Oscar. Nice to see you. We've never met in person, but we're both real. So, I mean, I think the flexibility is nice, but I do enjoy being in the office. But I think the other part of it that hasn't been addressed yet is like being an architect and understanding the context that you're working in. And for me, especially with the work that we do with community engagement and building community through architecture and other like scales of building is super important. So once I found out I was going to be working in Houston for BC, I wanted to move as soon as I financially could, so I could get an understanding of the place a bit better. And there's so many intangibles when you live in a place that I think make it really difficult to work like in a different city completely. So I think working from home is an awesome flexible option, but I don't like the idea of at least not having someone who's boots on the ground, like working with you, especially as a designer, I think.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you. Wesley, what is your feeling on the whole working from home and remote work thing?
As far as working from home, I didn't get to experience it from the pandemic since I didn't get hired until I started to come back into the office. And as soon as I was hired, like it's a part that we all go through training. My training took a bit longer since work was just really slow. Instead of just me doing like just two standard test projects that we do, I just turned into a third one since we were just really slow.
Mm-hmm.
And while I was doing my training, it was just sprinkling in like some minor revisions on different projects. So there would be times where I'd just be sitting at my desk asking around for work, and then get to the point where I'd be doing nothing. And it wasn't until like almost at the end of my 90 days where I was actually on a team helping out the project that's going out a month later.
Mm-hmm.
So as far as working from home, didn't get to really experience that from the pandemic.
Got it.
To be patient.
Yeah, that seems like that's been the watchword, I think, for the year. Last 12 months is about patience. Michael, I know you're not necessarily practicing architecture in an office, but still, that being said, what's your feeling on the work from the remote work from home sort of thing?
Yeah, I think not working in an office during the pandemic and working in the site really brought to light the process architects are involved in, and the fact that what decisions designers make have real tangible effects on people who can't make the choice to work in an office. I know that like I became really aware that as a designer, what I put on paper, it might be a little abstracted due to the processes that we use, but then everything we draw is then translated to an actual person putting that piece into the building and actually constructing that. I think the job during the pandemic, not only did the pandemic bring all those sort of like processes to light, but working in that process and being one of the people who was at the end of the line for that sort of thing really humbled me in a way that I think going back into architecture is going to affect how I design things, especially going forward.
That's awesome. Thank you, Michael. I'm going to stay with you on this. What has been the most challenging part of graduating and starting your career during a pandemic? I mean, I'm sure it was pretty easy. So like, there's probably not much to it.
Yeah, that's too simple. I think the hardest part for me was accepting change. We talked a little bit about like plans being derailed and stuff like that. It took me a really, really like long time to accept that my plans that I had for myself, my vision for where my life would be, has been derailed or changed in certain ways. And I think accepting that change was like a really long process, and I think adapting to that and working on your toes, not knowing what the next step is something that I think years down the road, I'm going to look back and say like, hey, I think there was something good that came out of this whole process.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think the last thing is, like I mentioned in the last answer, I think the humility that this brought me, especially not working in an office as an architect, I definitely appreciate more the different people that work with architects and the sacrifices a lot of them have to make in order for the designs we put forward to actually come to light. All these sort of things, I think, I may not right now be like super happy with how my plans have all changed and all that, but I think it will be more impactful and hopefully lead to better projects in the future.
Yeah, that's a really mature thought. Thank you, Michael. Kina, I think you may have had a story as well about the most challenging part of graduating and starting your career during this pandemic.
I mean, there's definitely the move. Originally, my plan was to take the process slow, kind of figuring out how I was going to move up there and whatnot, or here. My firm was under the impression that it was going to be, oh, move up here, we'll deal with the pandemic for 2 weeks, and then you'll be at the office. So that definitely changed completely. And just the isolation, I moved somewhere that I didn't know anybody at all. So dealing with that has been a struggle in terms of just work-life balance and not having somebody. I mean, I'm lucky enough to have a nice boss that does kind of preach work-life balance, but that trying to figure out what to do with your time in terms of, do I put myself into my work so that I'm not dealing with the pandemic, or do I try to find other outlets, but I can't deal with people? It's better now, but that balance of what to do with your life when you're in a place that you don't know was a struggle.
I can imagine. Remind me, Kino, what town are you in right now?
What?
What city are you in right now?
Philadelphia.
Philadelphia. All right. Anyone from Philadelphia on this webinar right now or listening, you got to look up Kina because he needs a buddy. Come hang out with. I appreciate that you sharing that. Allie, did you have a story as well, maybe about the most challenging part here during starting your career?
Yeah. I never thought that I would have to move back home ever again. And like, that was something I was very happy about. And then I had to move back home for 9 months. And that's not really a safe place for me emotionally. So that sucked.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was also living kind of because of that, ready to move like within 2 weeks at all times, which is also not very healthy because you're kind of in this like transient state where you're like, you have everything packed and then you don't go anywhere for 9 months. So I think that was the most difficult, and that was really starting to get to me. I'm lucky and like I do have friends back home who I could lean on, and like friends obviously from school who weren't around physically, but I could reach out to. But I think that was the most difficult part.
That makes, yeah. So I'm sorry to hear that. I remember when I had to go back home. This was not during the pandemic, needless to say. And yeah, I can relate. You're bringing back some bad memories. So, all right, let's move on to the next one here, which is, it's interesting. The question's about, and this would be to Genevieve, how did your involvement in the AIAS or Nomas or other membership organizations help prepare you for life after architecture school? Love to hear your thoughts there.
Well, since I was the chapter president for AIAS, it really directed me to a direction where I needed to be organized. And plus, since it was my last year, of course, thesis is an important year for any student. So I was able to learn how to balance and then also plan things ahead during that year. So that was something I actually learned through my internships for the AIAS, which was really beneficial during internships during your academia years. And then, so after graduating, then I was actually recruited by the AIA chapters to become one of the leaders. So I just became part of a committee where I was just helping out with communication. So, with Instagrams and stuff like that. And then just, communicating it to our local chapter members of, we have lunch and learns and stuff like that. And then now, since I've became involved, and then having connections with my school, and then also just having a good relationship with the student body, then I was promoted into the emerging professions for the chapter. So right now I'm in the transition of preparing that. So it's a big responsibility, just because I think the previous person who was holding the position, she got really busy with her job, and then just everything going on. So there wasn't a lot of movement. So I feel a little pressure just to kind of get this emerging profession to kind of keep going. So yeah.
That's really, that's a great story. And one of the things that's going through my mind is this idea that being involved in some sort of broader network other than just the friends that you maybe made in studio is something I know. When I was coming up, I graduated in '99 from University of Illinois. So sorry, where are my Illinois people on this call, by the way? I graduated, I didn't really know anybody other than the people in my studio, and sort of, thank God for a career fair, and that got me a job. And then I knew the people from my studio, plus I knew the people at this small firm that I worked at, and so forth. And that sort of started and I eventually ended up, it's funny, I had a review from one of my bosses in like 2005. He's like, you should get involved in like the AI Chicago. And I thought, okay, Sure. And I went on their website, found the Young Architects Forum, and I swear to God, within 3 months, someone asked me if I wanted to be the chairman of the Young Architects Forum. And I was like, I just wanted to like hang out and meet some people. It turned out to be like the smartest decision I made was to agree to do that because my network went from like 50 people to like 5,000 architects within 12 months. And I knew so many people and we had so much access and so forth. It's funny, that was like 2005. Fast forward to last year, one of the best books, probably maybe one of the top 10 books that's been recommended to me is a book called Dig Your Well Before You're Thirsty. I'll share the link to Amazon. And it's a book about basically the power of like kind of being proactive and building a network as you kind of grow as a professional and how you can provide a lot of value to other people. And then, you know, they can provide value for you as well. It sounds like what's cool to hear in your stories that you guys have shared so far is you've all done that in different ways, right? Like you went to your professor or you went to that career fair, like you made those moves to like start to build a little bit of a network. And of course, groups like the AIAS, Nomas, other organizations are a great way to do that. So kudos to all of you who've done that. We do have a couple questions here from the group. So let me take a quick peek right here. One question that's come up a little bit is, and you know, we interviewed Peter Exley, who's the president of AI National and a Chicago guy, and he had something to, along this as well. Oscar asked the question, aside from practice, did anyone look into applying for teaching positions? So looking to like academia or teaching as a way to sort of like make that your next move in your career if maybe the doors were closed around, you know, getting a job. Anybody pursue that and have any, pursue it and then, you know, tell us just the story of what happened, I suppose.
I applied
Oh,
for,
there we go. Maybe, Allie? Who is
sorry.
it?
It's a very short story because I never heard back, but I applied for a position at the Detroit Collaborative Community Design Center. I'm like messing up those letters right now. It's DCDC. Because they had a position open. A lot of the like CDC positions are affiliated with universities. So like when looking for positions, often I would see that, but it's a weird job market and I wasn't know what they're looking for. So
Yeah.
that story ends there.
Yeah. Go ahead, Michael.
I looked for a couple of positions, but they were more like tutoring sort of positions when it came to that. And it were like adjacent to architecture. The one interesting job in terms of teaching was like partnering with the Chesapeake Bay Preservation here in Maryland. They had a lot of opportunities for like architect students to learn about system thinking and all the effects of building an industry on the Chesapeake Bay. And like part of that would have been teaching other people, but I think a lot of the teaching positions, especially in the summer, were kind of closing off by the time I got out of the semester.
Yeah, that makes sense. I would kind of imagine they would have shut that down pretty fast. And I would imagine if I was an architecture professor, that I bet they were quite worried. Although, you know, in a situation like that, oftentimes folks go back to school. So I bet it was sort of a neutral setup. Anyone else have any stories there to share? If not, we can move on to another one. Oh, go ahead, Wesley. Yeah.
I just want to say hi to Oscar since he was one of my classmates. Hey, Oscar.
Hey, Wesley.
Also, I was also a teaching assistant before I graduated. So I have experience with working with students and helping them improve their grades. Mm-hmm. And the thought has crossed my mind about teaching, like what I do, like how to teach architecture, since it's completely different from what I originally thought when I was 13. Not having math involved, and it's more about getting creative.
Makes sense. Thank you, Wesley, and thank you, Oscar, for that question. Yeah, I think this is an interesting one. Harissa asked a question. What types of projects of yours were best to show in your portfolio that you feel like helped you get a job? be curious if anyone, that again, I don't even know if you guys had an opportunity to have like a actual in-person interview, but anyone have a comment there? Maybe Genevieve, I think you had a story there, right?
Yeah, let me try to remember my interview last year. I remember, so obviously it's all the projects I've done during my master's program. If they're as simple as, it is, so it's like if it's a basic, assembling something, with a group of people and stuff, it's just how you tell your story. No matter what your project is, it's just how you sell it. And that's something I'm also learning too right now in my office, is that how do you tell your story with your design and, the process and stuff like that. So no matter how complex or how simple you think your project is, it's just how you tell your story. So
I like that answer. Anyone else have any feedback on, how you use your portfolio, maybe what kinds of projects or what approach that helped you get your job? Go ahead, Allie.
Sorry, I talk too much. But because I knew that I wanted to be involved in community-based design early, I was able to have a portfolio with a lot of projects that focused on that. So I would say that if you're applying for a specific type of firm, even if you don't have projects that specifically speak to those issues, as the biggest move, if you're able to kind of frame the way you talk about them around either what excites you most about the project or how that kind of plugs into the type of work the firm does, what your role would be, that's really helpful. Because BC does a lot of affordable housing, I talked a lot about the affordable housing projects I had done / community engagement, which makes sense for BC. But I do know BC in the past has gotten a lot of portfolios that have nothing related to that type of work, and that tends to put people off. So especially when you're trying to do, I would say, community-based design, making sure that you're at least speaking to the issues that those organizations are focusing on is really important.
It's interesting. I feel like there's a sort of a consistent message here, which is know your audience. Because in order to sell, like you were saying, Genevieve, you need to know what your audience is. And it's funny. There's a funny story of me in 2012 starting Black Spectacles from nothing. And one of the first things I did in the first couple of months is I called the University of Illinois to see if they wanted to buy a school license at the time. And you guys are going to laugh at me, but I bought the Idiot's Guide to Sales or something like that, because I'd never tried to sell anything before. One of the, and I paced around my house and eventually called, and actually that call ended up leading me to partner with the AIAS. So it's sort of a funny series of things. But one of the things I've learned is when you're trying to sell something, what matters is understanding the problem that the other people have and trying to figure out if there's a fit. It's not so much selling, it's more of problem solving. And so I think the same thing applies if you're applying for a job. If you know what kind of work they do, if you know what they're looking for. So maybe even part of the interview process is about asking the right questions so you can understand what they're trying to solve for. And then you're okay, well, here's this great project I did, that aligns with that, or here's these great skills or this great experience that I have. So knowing your audience and not just knowing them, but knowing what they're trying to solve for, what their issues are they're working with, has served me really well. It sounds like it's some key wisdom from a couple of you. Maybe one more question from the group here. Let me see. There's this question about, Amanda asked, there's obviously a lot of different paths you can take with your architectural degree. How did each of you decide what path you wanted to pursue? And I'll add a little bit to the end after you got done with your degree. So you guys all came out of school and you made some choices about the path you were going to take. And maybe we can start with you, Kina, and then we could go to Wesley, and then Genevieve, Michael, and Allison. How did you decide what path you wanted to take?
It's kind of like just advice that I got from professors along the way. And then this situation kind of just worked out. Going back to the question that you asked previously about teaching. Teaching is something that I wanted to do, but I got advice from a lot of my professors that there's too many professors that just jump into doing it without having the experience of actually the profession. So I'd already decided that I was going to put that off for a while just to get some experience. And the firm that I'm working at now, it was one of the, I guess, couple of interviews that I did, but teaching came up, and I found out that they kind of switch on and off and do adjunct professors from time to time, and they get the faculty to help. So as soon as that happened, I was sold. I was like, this sounds like a great path to get that other side going. So yeah, that was kind of just the game plan for me. I'm still developing other plans as we go now. So yeah, things kind of just lined up through conversation.
Thank you, Kina. Wesley, how about you? How did you figure out what path to take, or what path you wanted to pursue, let's just say, after you got out of school?
I guess for me, this goes back to where I got my master's degree and like after I got my bachelor's. So I just wanted to go into architecture, but the reason I wasn't getting hired is because I didn't have any work experience. And that's been the story for about 2017 all the way up until through 2019, and then 2020 I was able to find a firm that was willing to give me a shot. So I'm just using this time to gain some experience and figure out what I'm going to do after that.
Got it. Thank you. Allie, how about you? How'd you determine your path?
Yeah, so I'm gonna break the rules and take it back to before I started architecture school. And the reason I wanted to study architecture was I really wanted to use design to have an impact on communities. And I didn't feel that, like, as an artist, which is what I was before, I took time before going to architecture school between high school and school. So I have that break. And I didn't feel like I had the skills to have the type of impact I wanted to make. So that's kind of what led me to architecture. And that's really what kind of led me through my 5 years, what brought me to AIAS and then to FBD. And so I've kind of been following the string this whole time. And then I worked for BC back in 2018, post Harvey. And the work we were doing then was amazing and impactful and really solidified what I wanted to do. And so I'm very lucky that I get to come back and, you know, continue working for this org. But when kind of the cliff came and I didn't know what was coming next, I was pretty ready to leave the profession and you know, look for other nonprofit work, doing community engagement or something, as long as it kind of fell within the like impact that I wanted. I'd like to say that I'm like very impact driven. I don't really care what I'm doing as long as it's like having some sort of impact on the community. So that's really what drove me to make the decisions I've made since graduation. And luckily I found myself back to architecture, but it was really likely that I wasn't going to be back here, honestly.
Yeah. That's great. All right. Well, looking at time, I appreciate that a lot. And looking at time, what I want to do is I want to close with sort of a lightning round here as we go again through all five of you and ask the question almost like maybe what's something you wish you knew as a student that you now know as a professional. And Michael, I'll start with you. Genevieve, I'll go to you next. What's something you now you have this great wisdom, you're on the other side, and you've been through a hell of a year. So what's the wisdom you're going to share, the one piece of wisdom you want to share with everybody?
Oh, shoot. I would say that the one piece of wisdom, at least I wish I had learned earlier, is that it's okay to be upset with your situation, especially if it's out of your control, but don't lose hope, look on the optimistic side, and make strides to change that situation. I always wanted to do like the Peace Corps and stuff like that, but I didn't know when I would do it. But now the pandemic changed everything, and I said, now is the time to do that sort of thing. And there's no point in waiting around for someday for that to happen. The time is now for change and for architects to be out there. So I think learning to not only accept change, as I mentioned earlier, but also getting out there and moving, and not feeling sorry for yourself. Taking the necessary steps to better your future, even if you can't see those fruits right now. Those fruits will come down the line for other people, for yourself, et cetera, et cetera.
That's great. Thank you, Michael. Genevieve, and then Kina.
So there are two things I wanted to share. So one thing I wish I knew while I was a student, and I can use it now, is that nothing is perfect. Everything is always in process. So that's something I was struggling with during school, is that I always try to perfect things and making sure things are done properly and orderly. Something I did, sorry, how do you say it? Something that I did and it was beneficial now is that, and I would like to advise to all the students here on this call, is that network, get yourself involved. As everybody here on this call, Freedom by Design, that's something I've always tried to get our chapter to do as well too. So good job, you guys. It's great. Always reach out. I mean, people will think it may be a waste of time, but honestly, it will help you. So it's not a waste of time, you guys. So
Yeah. And I mean, again, everyone who's on this call is involved in the AIAS in some capacity. And you're right, there's these benefits and so forth. It's also usually fun. We were doing the Young Architects Forum. It was amazing. Like me and Matt Dumich, we sat around and we were like, hey man, what do you want to do? I don't know, let's do this. That'd be cool. Yeah, okay. So like, it was fun. And of course the people you get to meet are fun as well. So thank you for that. Kina, what are your thoughts? And then we'll go to you, Wesley.
Kind of to piggyback on what Genevieve said about the perfect thing. Throughout school, even though design is kind of like process based, to me, professors just made it seem like there was a right answer or a right way to do it. And if you didn't do something that they liked, then it's wrong. In my experience, a lot of clients aren't like that. If they kind of work with you, they take out bits that they like, they take out bits that they don't like. Like, it's a process. It's not, this is the answer and I love everything you do or I hate everything you do. So kind of not being attached to what you're presenting and understanding that you can modify it. Yeah, that. And then the other part would just be to go along with that, kind of the idea of, even though you think something is obvious and you don't want to be looked at as stupid for saying something obvious, there will be somebody else that says it, and then everybody will look at them like, oh, that was great, I'm glad you said that. So if you think there's something that needs to be said, be the one to say it.
That's great, Kina. I'm smiling so big because, man, I learned that lesson about 10 years into my career. I'll never forget it. I was sitting in a job site trailer. I was this like 5'6" little architect in the room. There's like 20, people who would crush me with their right hand. And I'm listening to some smart code person talk about something. And I'm sitting there and I finally had the courage to ask a question. And nobody in the room asked a question. And there's 20 people. They're all staring at me. And I'm like, oh crap, I'm going to sound like a moron. But I asked the question, and for the love of God, 4 people who are sitting around me are like, oh yeah, that's a great question. I was wondering the same thing. And I was like, oh man, I learned such a great lesson. That's a great one. Thank you, Kina. Wesley, how about you? What's your great piece of advice for everybody listening in?
I guess for me, it'd be to focus more on the business side. Just get out there and network. Just know who you're going to be running into. Just build those connections. And that was just me when I got involved with both AIAS and Nomas. It was like went to AIAS, going to forum in 2018 in Seattle, not knowing anyone. And as soon as I ended, I couldn't wait for forum in Toronto. And then with Nomas, I just went to the first meeting not knowing what I was getting myself into, not knowing anyone. And then a year later, they all voted me in as vice president.
It sounds like my story too. Before you know it, they're like, "Do you want to be like?" I always say they always like they're handing you a bag of something that you don't want. They're like, "Would you like to be the president or the chairman or the vice president of something?" It's like, why are you acting like that? It's an amazing thing to be a part of these things. That's a great story. Thank you, Wesley. Allie, we'll close with you. What's your advice for everyone?
I think put very simply, like trust yourself and your intuition. If you like are offered a position and you have a really weird feeling about it, trust it. And also like this is obviously still a really difficult time. So two things to that, like prioritize your mental and physical health. I know architecture students are really bad at that, and I was also really bad at that, and I'm still trying to get better, but it's very important. And then also for the people who either have just graduated or about to graduate, please celebrate. I know like it's not what you had imagined, but at least now we know a little bit more about how to be safe. And so please allow yourself to be happy and celebrate with friends or family, or like even alone if you're alone, but please do that, because last year it was really scary and a lot of people just didn't do that. And I wish that my friends and I had celebrated that accomplishment a little bit more, because it's a big deal. So congratulations.
Yeah, that's wonderful. What a great way to close in such great advice, Allie. One thing I'll share in closing, I suppose, is I know when I came out, I kind of followed the traditional path and went got an architecture job, then got my master's, then got an architecture job, et cetera. And so I was just very, very focused on like, I need to be an architect and so forth. And now I'm not a practicing architect. I now run this ed tech company. And you know, with all and we've hired all kinds of different people from different industries and whatever. And the thing that I didn't really realize is that architecture school, the training that we get is like exceptional. It's absolutely exceptionally hard. Everybody I talk to, I've talked to thousands of people in the last 10 years who are not architects. Everyone smiles and I'm like, well, if you know an architect, and I go on and they all smile because everybody knows that their architect friends are the ones who are the hardest working, the most focused, et cetera. And so you all are absolutely battle tested to be wonderful contributing members of whether it's an architecture firm or something else. You guys have superpowers as that you earned through your education as architects. So don't forget that, and know that that can take you in all kinds of different directions. Even if maybe the path you wanted to go down maybe isn't currently open to you, there's other things you can do because of how the training that you guys have. So with that, Aaron, I'll pass it off to you and just say thank you to everyone who's attended all of our panel. It's been a lovely conversation, very impactful, I'm sure. And Aaron, also for your partnership and the opportunity to moderate with these incredibly, I don't know, exciting, inspiring, wonderful young architects.
Yes, of course. Thank you so, so much to this amazing panel and Mark for being an incredible moderator and for facilitating this amazing conversation. I hope that everyone watching was able to take something away and take it with them if you're graduating and you move into the profession. So thank you to our panelists, and congratulations to you as the class of 2020 and the class of 2021. If you've graduated or will be soon, we are all so proud of you, and don't forget to celebrate. As Ali said, you deserve it for this great accomplishment. And thank you to all who have been watching and who've watched all of our Thrive webinars throughout the semester. This is our final one for the spring, but watch out, we'll be coming back in the fall. You can catch any of our previous webinars and this one soon on the AIS website under the events tab in case you missed them. But yeah, thank you all so much for joining us.